My name is Todd Boyd, founder and CEO of Tacit. This particular session was of keen interest to me as I looked at starting Tacit last year and hearing from a lot of customers and different inputs. I think that this is certainly a topic that everyone is interested in. So maybe I'll just start off. I mean, Dan, maybe just to get right into it, as far as some of the challenges that you've experienced, and share some of your experiences with the group.
Sure. Morning, everybody. Hey, real quick, my name's Dan Patchko. I work at Worthington Industries. In case you don't know Worthington Industries, you're probably affected by Worthington somewhere in your life. Worthington is a diversified metals manufacturing company. We don't make steel, we process it. We also make and process steel that go into consumer goods like cars, lawnmowers, washing machines. We also make, end consumer products as well. Your gas grills at home might have a propane tank. That's probably, good chances are that's one of ours. And we also make engineered cabs. So these are the big cabs that sit on top of the construction and agricultural equipment as well. So, we provide safety and comfort for folks that are in mining, agriculture, whole bunch of industries that use that type of equipment. So we have a lot of diverse, global sites. We have about 90 sites globally. We support about over half of those, about 50, 60 of those sites. So we have a lot of manufacturing workers, and we call those folks our manufacturing athletes. So for us, mobile is important. It's important to those guys. As Peggy did a nice job showing, nobody wants to be tethered to a computer. So we've done a pretty nice job of using mobile in a lot of different of our manufacturing environments. And we kind of went from tablet form into smart glasses. We also we've tried a lot of the wearable technology, like smart badges, keep in, keep out zones. You might have seen that at one of the last, two conferences ago. I think Redpoint did a nice demo in the conference where they marked off on the screen, keep in, keep out. So we've tried a lot of that. We've also done exoskeletons and human augmentation too. But across that, I think the biggest challenge for us, you're always going to have technology issues. Technology is not perfect, and you have to navigate those waters. But more importantly, and I think it's tied to it, is just keeping people engaged, making sure people adopt the technology. And I really do think you need to have somebody that's part of, the team on the ground that knows both the technology and the business process. And they have to know how to exhibit empathy, right? So empathy is not just, you put yourself in somebody else's shoes and how does it make you feel? You have to imagine how it makes the other person feel. And lots of times if it's both the same about how you feel and how they feel, it's an easier match to try to, figure out what their challenges are and try to address them. But you really do need somebody out there that when there's a technology issue or there's a fit, because wearables, it's a type of technology where it's really in your personal space at the end of the day. So you think about everybody that's married in this room, and especially guys putting on the wedding ring. The first week or two, you got to try to get used to the wedding ring. After you've been wearing it for a while, you don't even know if it's there, but you do know when it's off, though, too, right? Same thing when you wear glasses, starting out wearing glasses. So it gets in your personal space, and you do have to take some time to adjust to it, and you do need somebody to help, with those adjustments and work with somebody, even from an emotional perspective. Their job's changing. You have to work through it with them. So I think from our perspective, one of the biggest challenges is just adoption and having somebody there on the floor, because I've seen it both where it doesn't work well if you don't have somebody, but if somebody's there working with the guys on the manufacturing floor, it works really well. And you want to get to a point where when you take that technology away, they complain and they say they can't do their jobs, right?
That's great. Yeah, high touch is definitely a need. Jason?
My name is Jason Sagstetter. I'm a global IT portfolio manager for H.B. Fuller. We are an adhesive company. We're pretty much involved in a lot of manufacturing of a lot of products that are out there. We specialize in managing complexity for our customers. And as a part of that process, you never know what you're going to encounter because their solution will be completely different, very unique. I know on some of the panels before they discussed that the work that they're doing or the scenarios they're doing for their workflows can vary greatly. It's something you may only do once or twice a year. We are focusing on being able to collaborate on very specialized skill sets that you may only have 2 or 3 experts in worldwide, but they may have to be at any given point 200 different locations the next day. And you obviously can't be everywhere at the same time. We're using some of the smart glasses to see if we can make sure that there is the ability for us to extend that coverage. If there's a customer that has an issue, can we help them actually show us in real time to reduce their downtime? So we're looking at being able to leverage that tool to minimize their complexity.
Great. Rick?
I'm Rick McNerney. I'm the manager of IT, mobile, and notifications. And most of my work is customer-facing as opposed to crew member-facing at JetBlue. But one of the things that's very interesting to us is that we're always trying to find new ways to enable our crew members to have much more personal and personalized interaction. So talking about diversity of solutions, we're dealing with customers who are all greatly different. So types of information that we may want to provide, you'd treat a customer a different way if they were traveling for, say, a funeral versus a birthday party. And you don't want to do that in a way that feels like big brothery. You want it to be something that's shared so that you can treat them in a very personalized way. And then beneath the wing, there's a ton of orchestration that goes on whenever you're talking about refueling, emptying toilets, loading cargo, moving baggage, bringing food on. And that orchestration I know there are other folks from other airlines here, when we're trying to get that turn, we're trying to do it as seamlessly as possible and as safely as possible. And one of the things that we're always looking at are better ways to get people away from a screen because they may be wearing protection gear that we don't want them to take off, to use their hands to touch something. And it's also a loud environment, so talking to it's very difficult. So some of the things that we've looked at are potentially wearables that they'd wear under their clothes and use things like taptic feedback, as well as the folks above the wing being able to use a watch or wearable device that's more conventional, the behavior, so that the customers are more at ease rather than a screen that someone's looking at. Tends to make customers uncomfortable because it's not a natural part culturally of what our consumers are used to. And so the way we're looking at that is potentially using wearable technology as a wrist-worn device that you can glance at as customers come in and out. For us, the biggest challenge is the outfitting of our vast number of crew members. We're a 22,000+ employee organization, and we want to make sure that everybody's got something that fits. And especially if we're going to outfit it as part of their uniform, we need to make sure that the battery life and the lifespan of the product itself is something that's easy for us to manage. There's been great strides made in the industry around MDM and managing the devices themselves, but one of the things that we're still really looking for is to find a product that is not obsolete in a year, and that the battery life is going to last around a week. Those are sort of our 2 golden variables in there. And solving that, I think, will really help us have the confidence that now it's something that the crew members feel like is just a part of their everyday. They go to work, they put it on. And there's a lot that we'd like to do with that technology to make some of the things that are very manual, like checking in at the airport, something that's very passive, that essentially they walk in the gate and we know they're there. But again, I mentioned the cultural challenges for consumers dealing with someone wearing a wearable. There's also the cultural challenges of our crew members, making sure that, again, that big brother, that they don't feel like we're tracking them everywhere, that we only know when you get to the airport. We don't know what you're doing at home whenever you have the watch on. So those are some of the challenges that we face.
Perfect. Julie, I know you've had some interesting experiences with the area that you're covering, shipping. Maybe give a little introduction.
Sure. I'm Julie Prey. I work with the American Bureau of Shipping, and we are a classification society, which I'm sure you have no idea what that is. But what we write the rules on how to build and maintain ships and offshore structures. And our field guys are responsible for verifying that these structures and these assets and these facilities meet our rules. So we've been using wearable technology in a lot of different ways. Our main focus right now is this concept of a remote or virtual inspection, looking at different inspection tasks and different inspection types that we can move to the back office and then work in collaboration with our clients in real time to carry out inspections. This has there's a lot of challenges with this. As you can imagine, we don't have connectivity offshore very well. We do not have connectivity on the middle of the ocean anywhere. Getting connectivity in a tank or a hold is virtually impossible right now. So this real-time thing is very challenging. But I think really our biggest challenge is buy-in and user acceptance. So we've always had executive support. Our executives have pushed this from day one. It's really that middle layer that's the biggest challenge, and the guys that are in the field, they're actually using it. We also started this at a time about 3 years ago when the offshore industry was at an all-time low, the shipping industry is at an all-time low. We have this, what we call activity-based adjustments, layoffs. And so nobody wants anything to do with this. You know, I come to them with this new crazy technology and they're like, oh, absolutely not. You know, I'm not gonna risk my job over this. So I lost my entire team the end of 2016 and 2017. So since then, I've pretty much have been the sole person pushing this effort because a lot of people don't want to take this risk in this kind of environment. So every day I'm hearing something different, you know, why we can't do this, or, you know, why do we need wearables? We can just use our phone. All kinds of, I've heard it all. So you name it, I've heard it. And at first it's really intimidating to address all of these things, especially when you're not a field person. So then they see you as, you know, you're the corporate office person and all you want to do is replace me and, you know, take my job away. And that's not it at all. So really when you start listening to what those concerns are and you start talking with them, you realize that a lot of those concerns are based on misperceptions or bad assumptions, false assumptions that they've made based on, you know, maybe marketing material or something that they've heard elsewhere. So I found that really, you know, getting the user, the end user involved and having them be part of the process and, you know, meeting their needs really helps to get their acceptance.
Randy, I know you've had a lot of experience with wearables at Ford, so if you want to give your number one challenge.
Sure. So my name is Randy Nunez. I work for Ford Motor Company in the IT organization. And my team is responsible for the extended reality tech trend. So it's looking at what AR, VR can do for Ford Motor Company. And we've done some significant things in the area. You'll see my colleague Elizabeth Barron will be up here talking about what we've done with VR and the design of the visualization aspect. But we're also looking into things like guided instructions, simulation, see what I see, and even the integration of other technologies like IoT and analytics to provide a better experience for our users. And so some of the challenges we have is the technology is a bit nascent. So like a lot of IT groups, they like commodities. They like things that are uniform. And the space is not quite there yet. So how do we get our teams working so that we take this nascent technology and we can stay ahead of the curve instead of waiting until it's commoditized? And the other thing is culturally. So you have to have people who are interested in sharing use cases for them. So it's getting the message out and understanding what everyone's doing in an organization our size is very difficult. So someone earlier called it bubbles, and we call it islands of AR and VR. Trying to coalesce those together, share best practices and lessons learned is very difficult.
Great. No, that's, I think there's a number of interesting points to be made. Would love to get some questions from the audience and address some of the questions that you have or experiences that you have in the field. So maybe we can open it up for questions. Any questions? Here.
So I guess we're going to the microphone.
He's coming up behind you.
That voice carries anyway. So Jeff Knight, Lockheed Martin. I heard you comment about the cultural environment, and you're taking away my job and things like that. And it's going to be a paradigm shift for everybody, right? I think the panel earlier talked about the similar thing about the concept that in a cultural environment, the more mature workers are going to not see a value added. But when you find that one or two mature workers, the other ones will come to the table. And then the other thing you've got is the challenge where the folks coming right out of college, they're all ready to go right now, right? So you got that middleware you got to kind of focus on. So I think what's important is that the technology is going to keep going no matter what. If we can relate the fact that the industry is using gaming industry technology now to drive our businesses, there's no time for us as business areas to develop that kind of stuff. So we have to adapt very quickly. And I think that's an important aspect of the culture optimization that we have to do across all the platforms. So recommend you stay focused, and I really would like to know some of the successes that maybe you've had with bridging that technology into the workforce.
I've got a great example that ties together a couple of the challenges that I mentioned here, is that we talk about managing perceptions. You've got to manage stakeholders, but you also have to manage the perceptions. And if you have an advocate, that's great. Call it a champion, someone who's pushing that particular project. But if you have an opponent, you can turn them into an advocate if you spend the time to figure out what is really their fear, what really is driving their objections to it. We had an individual who was a very senior fellow on the team who basically mocked the product before he'd even seen it. Before we even kicked off a pilot, he had already seen or heard what it was going to be. He already had a perception of what he thought it was. And when we were in the room, he had the biggest body language barrier and sat back. 30 seconds later, when you fire it up and show him what it can do in their production environment, how it can make their job much simpler, how it can actually help them communicate a problem to someone who can help them solve it rather than struggling through it themselves for the next 6 hours, he immediately saw the connection. He now is the biggest advocate of the particular pilot, and he's never used it. But he understands what the technology can do, and he understands how it applies to us. It isn't just a new toy. It isn't just a new shiny. It's going to actually provide value to his team and to his day.
Julie, I know you've had a lot of experience with that, so I'm sure you have some.
Those people just like that are my favorite people these days because I learn myself about the technology, so I come extremely prepared. I invite those people to every single event, every single meeting, and I'm ready. I'm ready for their negativity. I'm ready for them to tell me everything that's wrong. I don't tell them they're wrong ever, but I will show them that their perception is really not the case. So I always invite those kind of people.
Excellent.
So, like a lot of industries, we have an aging workforce. And there's two things I think we need to think about. One is, how do we attract and retain talent? And the talent that is coming out already has the tech savvy. And we can use this technology to draw those people in and retain them. The second thing is, we're going to have to do more with less. We're going to not have as many workers as we had before. So how do we capture that tacit knowledge that workers have and provide it to people in a way that they want to digest it? And I think part of that journey is taking it together. In the old days, we used to work in silos, and we'd throw things over the wall, and hopefully things would progress. Now what we do is we get in and we work together, because I know a little bit about this technology, but I don't know very much about your business. So we end up sharing and learning together. And as we do that, we end up coming with little epiphanies as we go along the way. But I think the real power is taking the journey together so everyone can experience what happened along that journey.
And certainly the use cases, I mean, it all comes down to use cases, and there's a place for each of the devices that are available today, and it all depends on the use case. So Any another question or topic to here?
Hi, my name is John Robertson from Kimberly-Clark. It's really great to have all of you in front of us and sharing what you know. My question is more around the technical nature of what we're trying to accomplish here. I know we're deploying a lot of technologies that are very modern and changing. The players that own and manufacture the products are changing constantly, and companies are here one day and gone the next, and the technology and the hardware is rapidly iterating, and our use cases change, and we also have challenges with trying to get that data or the information to and from our back-end systems through APIs or other mechanisms. So I'm really interested in your perspectives on how you sort of slay the dragon from that perspective technically, on how you stay abreast of the hardware, and also how do you maintain the support and the integration with your back-end systems, and how do you circumvent those challenges? Thanks.
Perfect.
I think one of the challenges I brought up is actually the standardization and like the battery life and the maintenance of the hardware itself. And though we don't have currently employed a lot of wearables, we've got POCs that we're working on as we figure out how we want to use them and incorporate them. But we do have one of the victories, I think, which goes across other airlines as well, is the partnership with Jeppson, which does all of the flight manuals. And so that transferred all of that paper that used to be put onto airplanes and turned it into an iPad. So we've matured that scenario, and in that environment, the technology was really just about digitization of moving that hard copy, and now it's dynamic so that the most up-to-date flight manuals are in crew members' hands. Where the sort of the back-end piece of the puzzle, which is what we're getting closer on as we're sort of watching the technology itself mature. We've been very focused on changing a lot of the server structures and our data domains into forms that are much more modern, moving away from older service structures like SOAP and moving over to REST. If I'm getting too in the weeds, someone can talk to me later. But the idea of really modernizing, I think there's a desire for real time amongst our crew members, but asynchronous is more stable, and the difference is usually milliseconds, which is not something that is detrimental in our business case. So a lot of times, what originally was estimated as this massive overhaul of the technology that we had was something that we could actually reduce down because it didn't need to be real time. It could be asynchronous, it could be batch. And so really looking at the data layers and the structure, and also moving a lot to the cloud, which allowed us to scale up and scale down based on demand. So those are some of the underlying technical sort of infrastructure pieces that we're doing ahead of time to better situate us for these devices that are very data hungry. And as we're looking at the sort of the customer side of it, is interesting because a lot of our customers are interacting, and we have a demand for more innovation in the wearable space, even from our customers. So we have an iPhone or an iPhone app and an Apple Watch app that we haven't really done a whole lot with because we're not really sure how people want to use it, and some of the other technologies that need to interact with it aren't quite there. So things like having a boarding pass that no one has to look at, you just tap it to an NFC device, and then the TSA member sees that. There's not really a standardization of those scanners. So there's a lot of challenges because we don't necessarily own all the pieces in the chain as well, which is another big challenge, especially as you're dealing with your own workforce. If we're trying to give out wearable devices and we want them to sync to personal phones, if we're in a bring your own device kind of environment, we may have users on iOS and Android. So what we've really tried to do from a fast, agile development process of the technology that's living on the wearables and sort of get ourselves ready for that, what we feel is an inevitable future, is really focus on our development partners and that core team to make sure that they are as excited about the technology as possible, and really focusing on the stable platforms, which currently sits in the world of at least for our market, most of our users are Apple users. So we tend to focus really heavily on Apple products. We have also a good number that are in the Android space, and so we partner very closely with Google. And so it's really those external partnerships for the big operating systems that is what we're looking at to try and help us bring in these new technologies. And that way, as the startups come and go that are creating the hardware, our hope is that they're actually relying on those same partners as well. So their technology is embracing, whether it's Kotlin or Swift, from a language perspective, so that as we build an application that lives on this device, it doesn't end up being obsolete a year after we've created it.
That's great. And Dan, I know you've had a lot of experience with a number of different wearables, maybe.
Yeah, well, I was going to say real quick to answer that question a little bit too. It is, because it's an emerging space right now, it is harder to stay abreast of everything. But I think really what grounds you, and this might be the architect coming out in me, I think really you have to be strong in the fundamentals of computing. So depending on no matter what the technology is, a lot of the fundamentals stay the same. So I think if you stay grounded in that, and there's certain principles that apply to mobile computing that no matter what form factor it is, they still apply, like access anywhere at any time, right? You need to account for that. And whether you're gonna have connectivity or not, you need to figure out, what do you need to build, or what do you need somebody to build for you to account for that? So there's things like that, I think, just staying grounded in terms of what are the fundamentals, and don't get lost and get tied up in the latest, technology or the latest, marketing, the marketing terms or whatever it is. I think that really helps. And then also just trying to build relationships with vendors, and then find the ones who really really stay close to those fundamentals and really understand, technology, and are not just trying to fill a niche at the end of the day, right? They understand the big picture. I think that's the true, you have to be really good at that.
Excellent. Any more inputs?
Tying back to the panel this morning, talking about operationally, you needed to have those daily stand-up meetings, those existing policies to be able to leverage those to be successful. Your IT organization has to have those same elements. If you don't have any kind of change control or policies that are ready to enable those changes, those elements have to be in place first to give you a strong foundation. As the sands of technology blow in the wind, at least your organizational policies will be able to adapt. You'll be able to more quickly adjust to those changes.
Excellent. Take another question. In the back here, or right over here, sorry.
Hi, Amy. I'm with Honeywell. Can you share some of your budget and financing best practices of some of these solutions? Are you using existing budgets for expenses? Are you creating new categories for hardware, software, platforms? Is your organization concerned about cannibalization? Have you had to let go of other categories or sacred cows? What's the money?
Who wants to take a crack at this first?
Well, I can tell you from a proof of concept perspective, at times when we've been able to establish some innovation-related budgets that allow people to pitch their ideas and to have a very small, dedicated committee look through it and quickly decide, is this viable or not, and try to help get the money to them as soon as they can, so that we don't have to get in the way of, try to minimize all the processing that's done, to have to write different kinds of justifications and things like that. So try to, at least from an innovation perspective, have a low barrier to entry. And if you get 1 in 100 things that end up moving into production, that could be very powerful for the company, depending on what it does. But a lot of times on the challenge side, it's, all right, you're going to save me this amount of money. What are you not going to do? So a lot of times it comes out of existing budgets. And if you say you're going to save 25% on training, well, what are you not going to buy in the training side to spend on this new technology? So it is quite a challenge. I don't know if I can get into details of the capitalization and those kinds of things, but it's definitely one of those things that you have to take into consideration.
Absolutely. Jason, Dan, you want to add any?
I think we had some good conversation in the back kind of about this stuff. It's like, where do you start, right? Are you going to wait for somebody to say, all right, this is going to save us, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, or are you just going to get in there and try to show, really start small and grow, and then see how that takes off, and then what do you do? And I think sometimes that's where you maybe need to use your corporate function to kind of step in if you have different business units and different sites. That's usually a good use of a corporate function, is come in and say, hey, we have some money set aside to try out some new ideas and try to get some synergy started. I think that's a good approach to it. And then as it takes off, people, they really see it's tangible to them, and then they're willing to spend more money, and then you can start, in some cases there's business process. If you're a goal-driven company and you already have goals and metrics that you're tracking, it makes it a lot easier, because everybody knows that, when we're going to measure a process, we're going to look at time, cost, quality, a whole bunch of different ways to measure it. And if you already have that, it's a lot easier to say, all right, if I have a hypothesis that I think this technology is going to save us this, or, increase quality, or, do whatever, and then you can go and try it out and you can actually see it. It's when you don't have those metrics, you don't have those goals, it makes it a little tough. But I think trying to baseline, what the as-is, process is today, and then you should build a hypothesis. Just use scientific method against it, and then just see how it goes. I think that's one approach too.
So going on top of that is that some of these technologies, when you have a paradigm shift, are offering a value or a function that's so new and so revolutionary, there isn't a good metric for it. When you're putting together your business case, you've got the data to give you your foundational KPIs. Look at what your cost reductions could be. Look at what our increased time to production could be. As an example, we have customers who have production lines that move at thousands of feet per minute. If we shut them down for 10 minutes, it's not as expensive as 10 hours. If it takes an expert to fly out there, yeah, I can say we saved airfare, we saved hotel, but the real value that goes in the, I'll call future category, is how much did we save them in their downtime? When you're putting together your formula, give it a weight of 0. Present what potential value those what-ifs could have, but don't count that in what your actual savings will be. As soon as you begin to present a little bit of traction, you can propose, hey, we had one of these what-ifs. If we would have had the technology, this would have been a realized value. It'll help build, I'll say, credibility to your use case.
Yeah, cost of downtime definitely is a key role. Take another question in the very back there.
Tiring Jeff out.
Hey, my name is John Bazell, and I'm with You Are Here Labs. My question is about culture and content. But first, I just want to applaud the panel for, I think, telling everybody to try to ignore the device horse race a little bit and invest in the things that don't change so fast, because things are so dynamic right now. So my question about content is this. We have clients in the automotive and industrial space where these applications of extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, et cetera, are really content dependent. I feel like we're kind of in a state where the web was in 1993, where it was kind of quaint, and then people put their physical content on there with digital cameras and flatbed scanners, and then it became meaningful and real. It seems that within many enterprise organizations, content is tied up with the engineers, and they don't want to release it to be optimized for the game engines that run a lot of AR and VR applications. Or, for instance, no CAD exists, so you have to volumetrically scan it to get it to CAD, to get it to a game-optimized model to deploy it. Can you all share any successes or strategies or thoughts around shaking loose content to enable these types of next-generation applications? Thanks.
Randy?
So one of the biggest challenges in the AR/VR world, so there are some tools you can use to create 3D content. They're called 3D gaming engines. I call it 3D rendering engines because I don't want to use the word gaming in a corporate construct. Part of the challenge is the CAD data is in one format, and to get it in these engine formats, you have to go through some, what I would call some artful activities. It's not an exact science. There's a bit of art to it. So the good news is there's lots of vendors out there that are working on this problem. And there's probably more than a dozen solutions to help you more easily go from the CAD data format into the rendering engine format. Now, there's still some content creation pieces that you need to know. These 3D rendering engines are not simple to use. They're a different programming paradigm, and you need to be more of a programmer mindset to do that. On the good news, there's lots of vendors, including some here, that are making the content creation easier, such that it's more like something that someone who has experience with Office could create. And there's different levels of, for example, augmented reality. There's a level that you're just giving people text and data in form of images or videos. You don't need a whole lot of skill to do that, especially if you have some of the vendors that are here, for example. Then you have the more detailed augmented reality, which might be geolocated, which might have these fancy animations. And again, the good news is you don't have to be an animator anymore. There are tools, including companies that are here, that could take a typical person, they could learn how to create that animation.
Excellent. Anyone else want to add anything to that question? No?
That was pretty good.
We'll take another question.
Check.
So the question was also, how do you get people to share that content if they seem to be holding on to it? I guess the answer is you start out by socializing what your business case is, why you need the content, and then you work with teams to figure out how is it that you can get that shared. And unfortunately, you might have to go through some escalation processes. You might have to have your management talk with their management and work through that. There's no easy answer to that. I think showing the value of having the content and what kind of productivity you can increase, what kind of quality you can improve, what kind of reduction in assembly time, those kinds of things. And so once you provide a business case, I think that it makes it easier for those people to share that data.
I'd look at why are they holding on to it as well? Right. I think there's probably, in this world now, that might be one of the most important resources to have, to build those digital assets. And I think sometimes just giving them that message might help too.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when I talked about sort of the infrastructure changes that have been going on at our organization, there's been a lot of focus of sort of breaking down those barriers. I call them data misers. It doesn't benefit anyone to hold on to that. I think there's an old thinking that if I hold on to this information, then you can't get rid of me because I'm the only one who knows how this data works. But when you turn that around to showing the person you value them for their knowledge and their ability to understand what the data means, and that you need them to be champions of that data to make sure that every other team understands how to interpret it appropriately, understands how to build off of it, then those sort of data misers go away. And we've worked really hard in moving away, because so many of the systems in the airline industry, you have GDSs and they're third-party organizations that you work with. And we don't call them vendors, we call them partners, because we really need to partner with them because we give them data and they compile data and need to give it back to us. It can't be a black box where we don't know how they've created it or generated it. And so a lot of that dialogue, I think, has always existed in technology. It's always been in there. The difference now is that we're building 3D models from it as opposed to Excel documents. So I think that we see it a lot around data analytics. There's always this fear that someone will interpret it. And analytics is like statistics. You can make it say anything. So I think that really helping people understand culturally why sharing the data empowers everyone to do more and actually gives them more value because they're the trusted source that has been using that data or capturing that data, empowers them more than just sitting on it and making everybody have to come through them as a bottleneck.
That's great. No, great questions. And, open it up for another question, but also if there are any tips or things that you found successful that you would be interested to share. I'm sure everyone would be interested in that. Over here.
Yeah, Zach Peters from Komatsu America. So earlier on, you talked about the nascentness of the technology, right, and how new it is and how unique. Sometimes you've got development teams that are bought in, you've got the end user who's bought in, but there's a roadblock that sits in between those two, and that typically wears the acronym of IT. So how do you structure those conversations to get them past something that may be outside of their realm of expertise or comfort zone, something that you can go to them with to help tear down that roadblock?
Dan, Jason?
So that kind of falls back to the stakeholder management. You need to make sure that they understand you are there to work with them. IT often has a lot of constraints for a lot of varied reasons. They see you as just yet another distraction or yet another case coming on. You don't understand what impact it would have to them. You need to have a real intimate dialogue directly with them to understand what is that obstacle, what is driving that fear. Are they afraid that by putting this technology on, there's a potential data breach and now they're going to get blamed for? If you're going to be increasing their risk or their complexity, help architect a solution that can simplify it, or at the very least help them develop a policy that indemnifies them as a part of it. If you make them, again, an advocate, they'll help you do it if they recognize you are a part of a solution, not just lobbing something over the wall. It's just like not sharing the content. We are one team. Is it a business problem or an IT problem? No, it's our problem. Let's work together to solve it.
Dan, you want to add?
I would say that's a great set of points. I think the biggest thing too is I'd look at, how is your relationship or how are the group's relationships with IT, and just not even IT, but how is everyone else getting along, and are you working on those relationships? Because usually that's where a lot of it breaks down, especially when teams build silos amongst each other. You got to figure out why. And usually when you get down to it, everyone's kind of working towards the same goal, but you have to put it in those terms. And then if you make everybody part of the solving the problem, then there's more buy-in, and then ask for, rather than saying no, how would you solve the problem then? And make everybody, accountable for that solution as well.
And when there is a problem, there's no blame game. Failure is an event, not a person. So when you encounter those obstacles, you will learn forward, as you saw in the slides before. Make sure that no one gets scapegoated for it. That's a key to actually maintaining that relationship.
Right. Yeah, I think building the environment, that's actually been a challenge that I've had with, brought in a new hire right out of school, and she is highly effective, and I don't think has failed very much. And so one of the things that had to make her comfortable with is that the work that my team is doing does not succeed every time. And sometimes we spend money and people say, well, you spent this money, where did it go, what did we get? And what we do is give them learnings from it. So you're like, right, we paid for this, but now we've learned X. And because of that, we can move forward. And so really that learning fast as opposed to fast failing, which I really like, I think is a big part of it. And it's something that helps if you can get buy-in up the chain, because you may have an IT leader who feels very pinched by budget or feels very constrained. I came actually from the marketing world and was brought into IT whenever we did a reorg that changed from the traditional waterfall methodology moving to Agile. And Agile is built upon the idea of learning from your mistakes and being able to move forward. And it also has moved us to a product model where everybody, the IT team now felt ownership of these things rather than their matrix partners feeling like the business user owned the product and that IT was just executing it and then walking away. That helped a lot too, because it empowered IT to have some possession culturally that like, this is my product and I want it to succeed because I know it helps you do your job. And so that was very beneficial as well. So I think it's the same story. It's how do you empower your roadblocks so that they feel like they're having a positive impact? Because at the end of the day, everybody just wants to do a good job.
Great inputs. And we'll have one more question, and I think we'll, any other questions? Right here, in the front.
This is Brian Laughlin. I'm from the Boeing Company. And you're asking about kind of piling on to kind of lessons learned and stuff. Hey, Randy. So I love what you guys are saying. In addition to that, I'd have to say that sometimes you just have to go and do something. You have to ask forgiveness rather than permission, and you got to be very careful with that because you can get your head cut off really quickly. But in God we trust, others bring data, and unless you have data, it's just a philosophical discussion. So sometimes you just, and you can do this in a small way. You don't have to do an earth-shaking kind of a thing. You want to mitigate the risk, but sometimes you just have to go and try stuff out because you'll get shut out by the politics or whatnot. But I would suggest that to be very careful when you do that. And I think the other thing is to keep your customers at your hip, because I don't know about you guys, probably Randy would agree with me, but my paycheck is signed on the factory floor where those airplanes are built, right? So I want those mechanics and those people that get those planes out the door, I want them at my hip. That is my defense. I should never have to defend myself. When I get the stink eye from somebody who doesn't agree, I go get my customer and I say, would you like to tell them why this is important to you? And then I just back off and let them handle the situation. So I hope that's helpful, but great advice. I appreciate that from the panel.
Great input. One more question over here. Right here in the front.
My name is Pandu Boyapalli. I'm with the Toro Company. So I have a question. Maybe I want to ask for your thoughts on this. So this is a new area of technology. I mean, maybe around for a couple, 3 years, but so this technology is not taught in the schools. I mean, in many of the schools out there. Can you please share your experiences? Like, do we bring in, new graduates, and then train them, or do we develop this talent internally? Maybe I don't know. There's not probably a one straight answer, but maybe you can share your experiences. Thanks.
Yeah, I go back to the fundamentals, right? If you get somebody that's strong in fundamentals, they should be able to pick up the technology pretty quick. But especially in this space where you might need to train on, user experience, just the different form factors in terms of user interfaces. I think that's new to a lot of different people, even some of the more experienced type developers that are out there. So I would try to spend a little more time trying to, find somebody who's good at that and then try to adapt it to whatever you're trying to do within your business process to improve it. Because it's not just one size fits all. I would look at the business process and figure out, what are you trying to do? And then the programming, the configuration, just looking at the size of this room, looking at different vendors over the years with this conference, stuff's developing, and it's developing well. Look at more and more platforms that are coming out that make it, more, the programming more abstract. You're not down into the device level in all cases. So that type of stuff will bubble back up like everything else has, right? So if you find somebody that knows, good fundamentals around programming and logic, and find someone that's really strong in, UI, and even branch out to, other parts, folks that are good in ergonomics, that kind of stuff where you can get that team together and build the right solution for somebody, because it's not just it is a team-based thing that you got to cover a lot of different areas for.
Okay. Any final?
Critical thinking and problem solving are far more valuable than how strong of a developer they are, because those will transfer no matter what the technology is or the language is. And if you learn that in school and you don't know anything about business, I can still teach you that rest. I can't teach you those fundamentals.
Yeah,
really?
Sorry,
No.
did I? I think one of the things in a past life, I was a high school teacher. Students are really technology forward. So though it may not be taught in the schools, I think that as this evolves, the demand will be for it to be in the schools, and the universities will catch up. Because if you look at hacker spaces and the maker fairs and things like that, you have students who want to be cyborgs. So the idea of moving this technology first, that maker scene is where that is starting and where people are playing with the technology. And I think beyond that is where that gets brought back to us, and it's that critical thinking and the finding a novel way to solve a problem. So I think that it's growing as fast as the technology is. It just may not be something that we can quantify through university curriculum.
Our kids can teach us a lot, for sure. And I'm sure we could go on in challenges and discussion, but that's all the time that we have. Thanks for the great questions. It was really good. Okay, thanks.